The calendar shifts over to March, and just like that, we don't even know how many episodes we have left to present to you here, the Scholastic Sit Down. But many would say that this one is arguably the highest anticipated one of the season because it's the highest anticipated week of the season. The red and combined levels have arrived at the state championships at All State Arena. Welcome in, everybody, to this episode alongside Dylan Ward, my partner. My name is Luke Jordan here to talk not just scholastic hockey, but at this point, state hockey is here. We have quarterfinals and semifinals to talk about and finals to preview. So, Dylan, let's put on those hard hats. We're ready to go.
Yeah, Luke. We just got done as the network broadcasted 8 games in 2 days, and we've got two more on the boys' side on Friday night, and they're going to be big ones. But some exciting stuff on how we got there.
Absolutely. And let's just get right into it. We talked about the red division. We entered the weekend with 8 teams. We left with two. Let's start with the quarterfinal games and go up the bracket here. We started off and kicked off our quarterfinal 4 game quadruple header on SHL Network with New Trier Green taking on St. Ignatius. This one, although a 2-7 matchup, we've seen the 2-7 matchup in the past
Mm.
come into full effect, but that would not be the case this year amidst a great fight from the St. Ignatius Wolfpack, but they fell down 2-0 early on. Jenner Layden with a shorthanded goal in the first period really extended and doubled on that New Trier lead. Teddy Burke would find one to open up the second, but from then on it would remain all Trevs, even though the defending three-time state champions back to back to back were outshot 40-34. Max Reed stands on his head, stopping 39, and New Trier would move on to the semifinal game, Dylan.
Yeah, seventh time these two teams have faced one another. You could maybe even make the argument that it's 8 times because they had to play one game in two different
Yeah.
segments with that postponement. But at the end of the day, New Trier finds a way to get it done. This is the first goal they've allowed in the state tournament, but it doesn't matter because they score four. They score in every period, and that's a big one for New Trier, especially getting outshot. Seven seed has made it to the state championship game 2 years in a row, and this ended that streak. And Nutria as the two seed, oddly enough, Luke, the two seed hasn't made the state championship game since 2019, which is hard to
Bizarre.
believe. But as we'll continue in this recap, I think you'll find that that streak will end.
Yeah, and carrying on to the lower half of the lower bracket, the winner knew that they would take on New Trier walking on the ice, having seen the game before. It was number 3 Loyola, who was obviously very hungry to try to get to that semifinal game, not just for the purpose of the semifinal, but to try to knock off their rival. Lake Forest had the number 6 spot. They had one heck of a season, but with goals from Max Kading, Jack Blazejowski, and a 37 save shutout from Charlie Trapp. Yet again, it's phenomenal goal play that moves another team on to the semifinal game as Loyola would take this 2-0, Dylan.
Yeah, this was a game Loyola was probably favored to win going in, but your heart breaks for Lake Forest, who put up such an incredible season, breakout year for their club. And, a sixth seed is a great honor, but at the end of the day, they get knocked out in the quarterfinals here, and Loyola moves on. Charlie Trapp, you talk about a bounce back from the SHL championship game. How about the round before this for Loyola, where he allowed 5 goals to New Trier Blue, or maybe four, excuse me, but. Either way, he was locked in for this one, and it got his team to the Final Four.
Yeah, absolutely, Dylan. And you got to give credit to Lake Forest. The Red Varsity Division has been around for a long time, and this is the highest seed that the Scouts ever had in program history since that Red Division. So that's just how magical of a year it was, as Steve Sarauer will try to rebuild around and get another stacked team going into next season. Going to the upper half of the bracket, we started with the number 1 squadron in the state, St. Viator. They'd take on Glenbrook North, and these two teams met in the SHL quarterfinal as the Lions tried to avoid a trap type game, and they were in a cage early. Penalty shot after a complete scuffle in the crease, really rare to come by. And Theo Giorthanis, I've always described him as a bigger game player. Whenever we have him on the network, he usually finds a way to do something. And although a penalty shot, he still finally got a goal by Calder Turpin. Not something that many teams could claim they've done over the last month or so. But from then on, St. Viator would gain their ground. Ryan Loftus, Colton Newhouse, Pepe LeBoy, Newhouse, Prizwara, all combining for five as they outshoot GBN 31 to 17. They would run away with this one 5-1, Dylan. Five unanswered.
Yeah, a bit of a scare for St. Viator, something they haven't faced in a long time. This was the first goal St. Viator allowed in 5 games. They had a 5 game shutout streak dating to the not only state playoffs but SHL playoffs. And you know, Theo Gerathanis gets the penalty shot, but because the puck was covered in the crease, it wasn't a situation where a player was forced to take the penalty shot, right? Jeff Marks got to choose out of his 5 guys on the ice who to take that, and Theo Gerathanis seemed like the right call, and it turned out to be as he scored the goal. But St. Viator took that as a wake-up call, and they just pounced on it, and they scored 5 unanswered to knock out GBN. And St. Viator, it's always an accomplishment to get to the quarterfinal, but where they are in the season and what they have accomplished so far, this would absolutely be a letdown, even after winning the SHL final. So they took matters into their own hands in this one and made sure that that penalty shot goal was the only one GBN would have that night.
Yeah, absolutely right, Dylan. And we went to our last quarterfinal on the night, and this one was entertaining. Although low scoring, both these netminders stood on their heads. It was a battle between Levi Brown, the freshman netminder, and the number 4 York Dukes, as they would take on the number 5 Glenbrook South Titans that feature another underclassman in Thomas Preston. We had to wait until the second period to find goals in this one, even though York outshot GBS 15 to 6 in the first 17, but it was Jonah Weiss who was the overtime hero in the previous round, opening the scoring here. Ethan Maurer would tie it up just under 4 minutes later, and then Teddy McCrulis would score the eventual game-winning goal with 2:06 left in the second. No goals getting by Preston in the third, although 13 shots from the Dukes, but that was it. And many thought that York would have this game, but Thomas Preston snatches it from them. He ends up stopping 35 of 36, and Glenbrook South would move on to the semifinals for the first time since 2020. And as we talked about on the air, Dylan, it was their first time playing since 2018 because of the COVID years. So an electric quarterfinal win for the Titans.
Yeah, and Glenbrook South, I mean, they've been on the wrong side of upsets in the quarterfinals for years. They were the number 3 seed. They lost to St. Ignatius. Like, 3 years back, they were the number 2 seed in the state. They lost to Loyola with a last minute heartbreaker. So, congrats to GBS on making the Final Four here. This would not be Thomas Preston's last outstanding performance of the weekend. Teddy McCrulis gets the game winner. And York, a season that had such high hopes. It's heartbreaking for them to lose here in the quarterfinals, especially for a York program that has been to the state championship, with some might call not as impressive or a favored team to go that far as they had this year with Evan Polikitis and Ben Stein behind the bench. But unfortunately, they could not get it done, and their road ends here, and GBS moves on.
So, although a less than 24-hour turnaround for some, the anticipation loomed high for the semifinal games. Definitely helps when your first one is one of the most classic rivalries, if not the most in the state. Loyola, New Trier, number 3 and number 2. Plenty of meetings all time between these two schools. Not many bigger than this one, with the exception to a couple of state championship matchups in the past. But boy, oh boy, New Trier would open up with 120 left on the power play in the first period. And from then on, they just had their sights on yet another state championship game appearance. Soren Selleck, Keegan Roween in the second. Charlie Cannon, Jack Woolabin would put on the cherry on top to make it 5-0 after he actually was injured in this game. Came back, scored, had to feel good for him. And once again, you talk about it, goaltending. If you have it, you can do it, and Max Reed stops all 28 he faces as New Trier will try to make it 4 state championships in a row for their school program for the first time since 1999 to 2002, Dylan.
Yeah, Max Reed over the his 3 starts in the A High State tournament, he's allowed 1 goal, right? And that was to St. Ignatius. This New Trier Loyola game, probably was docked as the one that's going to be a little bit more exciting,
Yeah.
closer of a game. And New Trier just completely laid it all out there and played it. You could almost say just a perfect game in the A-High State semifinals against your rival, just not giving them any bit of a chance. It was 0-0 for a long time, 1:20 left in the first, Luke, but after that, they came out firing in the second period and just really never looked back. And New Trier, fourth straight year, is into the state championship game. Can they win their fourth straight? We'll find out soon.
Yeah, and I know with Nutrier's path, really up until that quarterfinal, semifinal series, yeah, it was easy. It was easy for most teams, but can we look at this stat line and appreciate it real quick? Max Reed, 3 games in the state tournament, 87 shots faced, 86 stop. That's a save percentage of 989. That is
Jeez,
nearly 99%, Dylan. Like they
that
joke
is
about goalies saying, "Oh, well,
incredible.
I'll stop 90%, 99% of the shots I face." Max Reed can almost claim that here in the state tournament, which is
Yeah.
unbelievable. And we'll talk about Thomas Preston's stats when we get there. But let's talk about the game that he was featured in first. The semifinal, number one St. Fider, number five Glenbrook South. And Dylan says it so well because to be honest with you, there wasn't a lot of high expectation in Glenbrook South in this game. They just weren't sure. They haven't seen that peak play from Glenbrook South as of late until this game where they poured out their hearts. An unbelievable affair. It was 1-1 after the first, 2-2 after the second. Then they had to build the tension by scoring absolutely nothing in the third. So Glenbrook South just kept finding a way to claw back, although ending up outshot in this game by 22. They force overtime, and it just takes past 3 minutes, 3 minutes and 21 seconds exactly into the first overtime. Mason Steffen finds John Colpins on the right side. He just slides it towards the net, not on net. And Matthew Ciccone is right there to redirect it on past Preston to send the Lions to the state championship for the first time since 2022, as they still look for their first state championship. And before you speak, Dylan, want to take a look. So another sensational performance for Preston, of course. 42 saves on 45 shots. Now, Max Reed's line is impressive, but you talk about keeping your team in the game with some of the shots that Preston faced over these playoffs. I mean, it's one of the best runs that we've ever seen. He ends up with a 1.25 goals allowed average and a 947 save percentage in the state tournament. 114 shots faced in 4 games. I mean, he was taking the workload and doing his best with it, Dylan.
Yeah, Luke, it's one of those where, you know, St. Viator, 3 goals, sounds about right in a state game, but their goalie on the other end, Calder Turpin, has been lights out as well. So yeah, Luke, it's one of those where you look at 42 saves by Thomas Preston, but that does not tell you the full picture. You and I obviously were both on the broadcast for that one, and the quality chances that
Yeah.
he was shutting down after over and over and over again. I mean, that third period especially, he saw 18 shots. I would say probably 10 of those shots you assume are going in based on the build-up and watching in live time, and he finds a way to save them. And for GBS, they came into this game as underdogs. They knew that, but they played as well as you possibly could, gave them everything they had. And for St. Viator, this is your first real scare in the postseason, be that SHL or state. And they were able to get it done. They're the number one seed for a reason. Matthew Ciccone with the great goal. And Luke, I got to give you your flowers on an absolutely incredible call of the
Thank you.
game-winning goal. That was purely electrifying listening to that one over.
Well, let me tell you, I actually got like my stomach sunk because I wasn't exactly sure Ciccone did get the last touch. I was able to look for a moment, but then he's skating right at you. You can't even see his TV number. Do they even have TV numbers on those jerseys?
They do.
They do. Okay.
Yeah.
Of course, I forget to actually acknowledge that. But I was not sure it was him. And thankfully, our coverage of the regular season, the SHL playoffs, I've seen this team so many darn times. Didn't even need to look at the number. I was like, that's got to be Ciccone. That's got to be Matthew Ciccone. And if I missed that, I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. I would have never slept. I would probably still have not slept. So
Yeah, I'm sure Wes gave you a little scare afterwards too, and he said, "I'm
yeah,
not sure if that actually hit
I was
Ciccone,
like,
but
Wes, don't do this to me right now. I don't need this. Like, we're already stressed as is. Overtime has your heart pounding, and oh, but yeah. Anyway, so state championship is set. It's St. Viator and New Trier, but let's talk combined. Okay, combined bracket time. We did not see the quarterfinals. I got to watch a little bit of it on tape, thanks to Sheelan Sports Media, who was able to cover that from Rosemont. We had the semifinals for you on Marquee Sports Network on Sunday night, but we'll get to that after we talk real quick about the quarterfinal games. Just kind of zipping through them here, going from top to bottom. The defending runner-ups in VGHW, they have the one seed this year again as they took on Libertyville in the quarterfinal, who they were able to upset Rockford. So it's a 1 versus 9 matchup in BGHW. This game was 1-1 for a while. Stampede eventually ran away with a 4-1 victory. Now, this was a very highly anticipated one, as we learned from a claim on the podcast. Somebody saying that Prep and Plainfield is going to be an incredible game. And I was expecting an incredible game too, but Plainfield, they did a lot in a little. They only had 17 shots in this game. They score 7 goals, Dylan. They had a 4-0 lead against Prep, who are the North Central champions, after the first period. And you just look down the line here. So many different names in the score sheet for the Predators as they would win this one 7-3. Most notably, 5 players with multi-point games on the Predators. So the first semifinal would be set at BGHW and Plainfield. Going to the bottom half, boy, oh boy, do we have a great top half for the bottom half of the bracket type of game to get things started, if that makes any sense for you guys. In double overtime, it was Maine with a game winner from JP Donahue to lift Maine over Chicago North. And look, I played against Chicago North in my past. I feel a little bit for them because it seems to be the most heartbreaking way they go out
Mm.
every season, whether it's state semifinals last year, state championship a few years back to prep. This time it's the quarterfinals and it's still in overtime. So my heart aches for you guys, and I wish you the best, even though I didn't like playing against you in high school. But that's the job. You got to be neutral, have respect for everybody, and I have a special respect for them because they have been through a lot. And this Warriors club, in their second year, the number 3 seed would host Glenbard in the quarterfinal, a 6-2 victory for the Warriors. They actually conceded the first goal in this one and then scored 25 seconds later. They scored 10 seconds after that and they would just start to really run away with it, eventually taking a 4-1 lead and winning 6-2. So, any mini takeaways from those quarterfinal games, Dylan?
Well, first of all, what a game between Maine and Chicago North, as you mentioned. Maine not only wins in double overtime, Luke, but they tied the game with 21 seconds
Yeah,
to go in the third. Matheson Cooney delivers that game tying goal. It looked like their season was going to end. That's another 7-2 matchup where the 7 seed was creeping in there. Besides that, not necessarily too shocked with a lot of these results. I'd say the prep losing is probably the most, but at the end of the day, that's a 4-5, and these are two teams that play in different regular season leagues, so you just never know when those two match up. Warriors looked good in those quarterfinals too, as they look for a three-peat. Um, just kind of mostly what you'd expect. Maybe a couple surprises in those quarterfinals. I think the biggest one is probably Maine needing overtime, second biggest being Prep losing, but all in all, just not too much off the normal person's radar.
yeah, absolutely. And that's so funny you mentioned they tied up the game late. I completely forgot, to be honest with you, and I skipped over it on the score sheet like an idiot. But I was actually watching that game live, and I was saying, okay, there's a minute left. I'm gonna pull up my Chicago North board and I'm going to start preparing for Chicago North. I thought North had that game in the bag, and I had a chance to do Chicago North earlier this season. So I started to pull up my old board. I was starting to update some stats. I'm like, all right, so I've seen this team before. I recognize these names. I'll feel pretty good going into the semifinal game that we were doing. And then Maine scores. And I'm like, oh gosh, I did a main game in the O'Grady tournament for the Trevian Hockey Network. So I pull up my old main board. Now I've got them both split screened. And I'm like, I'm trying to like study two teams at once. I'm like, this is
Yeah.
ridiculous. And I did that for two overtimes until Maine finally put it away. So then I deleted the Chicago North one. I was like, okay, we're set. I can work with Maine. So yeah, I just thought that was a funny thing to share because, of course, as a broadcaster, usually most guys are watching the tape before, and having seen both those teams already, I was like, I don't know who I'm gonna get, so I was freaking out a little bit. But that would bring us on to the semifinals, where we started with number two Maine and number three Warriors. I had to call for this one on marquee, and there wasn't much, which is good for one side, as Maine would not concede a goal. And you kind of had the assumption that it could be a high scoring game. Matheson Cooney scored less than 5 minutes into this one, nothing after, as a 16 save shutout occurs from the senior Joey Murphy, and Maine is going back to the state championship for the first time since the mid 2010s. The most recent time I could find was they played in the championship game in 2015 against Glenbard and lost. I could not find any other state championship appearances for this Maine club that has made it far in the past, but now they're at the top game.
Luke, that sounds about right. I might have been in the building for that game,
Oh,
that
really?
main state championship game. That was what, 2015? Maybe not. Maybe that would have
I was
been
gonna say
my
you probably be a little young,
2018. That would have been, or 2015, I should say. That would have been my eighth grade year. So I don't think I
maybe.
was following high school hockey as closely back then.
Going on to the next game, we got BGHW and Plainfield. And Plainfield scored first on a shorthanded goal for Max Feely, his third goal of the state tournament. Then BGHW broke the alarm clock. They really woke up. Reed Gerschertz, Aiden Gogarty with two of his own in the second period. And going into the break, BGHW would lead 3-1. Landon Porter, who is a lethal scoring unit, one of many on this Plainfield team, was able to find one early goings of the third, but then eventually Jackson Ronkowski, and with some help from Cam Christopher in the end, were able to shovel away the Predators and win this one by a total of 5-2. Solid performance from Ronan Alanes, who stopped 20 out of 22 in BGHW back in the state game, this time at Allstate Arena.
Yeah, and it was a little less stressful this time for them. We'll talk a little bit more about their semifinal last year when we get to the state final preview because it was those same two teams. But at the end of the day, BGHW, while it was a little sweaty at some points, are able to get it done and by a decisive 5-2 score as well. So they scored a couple of late goals to really put the icing on top of the cake. Cam Christopher, the J.J. O'Connor Player of the Year in the combined division, gets that fifth goal, and the Stampede stamp onto the Allstate Arena.
And with that being said, let's just roll right into the Red State title game. Talk about J.J. O'Connor, Player of the Year. It was arguably a player on each of these two teams that were up for that running. You had Jack Herstrit, who won it, and Ryan Loftus on the St. Viator end, who many thought could have been it. And now these two teams will get to meet yet again, but this time for the state championship instead of the SHL championship. It's number one St. Viator, number two New Trier in the red division, 8:30 p.m. Friday at Allstate Arena. I look, a lot of people don't like all chalk, but this matchup, I feel like for the most part of the season, many people would agree with me. You had St. Viator, New Trier, and the rest. I mean, obviously Loyola was great, York great, Glenbrook South great, but you just felt there was this slight gap, and that's what proves to be as we've got all chalk in the state championship, and I don't know if I'd want it any other way really. When you look at the matchups, we've talked to Adam Cheras, or he will be the special guest after we preview this. Pardon me, but it this is going to be so much fun, Dylan.
Yeah, it's the game you just have to hope for if you're a fan of high school hockey and you know the ins and outs. I mean, this is going to be a huge rubber match, Luke. These two teams are 2-2 against each other this year. New Trier took the regular season series in the SHL, and then St. Viator beat them in the SHL final to win the Scholastic Cup. So that's two wins for each team. you look at the scores. They played two overtime games. They played a 1-0 game. They played a 3-1 game with an empty netter. Besides the empty netter, Luke, these two teams have played four one-goal contests with two of them needing overtime. I have no idea who's going to win this. I think, if there was an option to bet on it, it would be a pick 'em. It would be,
Yeah.
I don't think either team is really favored here more than the other. I think this is about as true of a 50-50 coin flip state championship we've had in years. And this is also the first time that the state championship teams are a direct rematch of the SHL final team since 2019. Also, the first time one versus two since 2019. And I love that because, in the past, New Trier has, they've played the SHL final and then they go on to state and it's a different team. I love that this is a direct rematch. It's going to be just pure cinema.
Yeah, absolutely. As you mentioned, plenty of meetings between these two on the season. Looking at their state paths, you've got same fighter 5-0, 5-0, 5-1, 3-2 prior to that semifinal game, just allowing one goal. And throughout this entire path for New Trier, they've allowed one goal. Max Reed, Calder Turpin. Max Reed has really made a name for himself because remember, start of the season when I was doing a couple of games for New Trier, they actually had Max Ascione, the backup, go in against Lake Forest in that second matchup because they weren't sure about Max Reed. I mean, there wasn't a true ace labeled on his name, and he's earned that over time. You've got Calder Turpin and Joey Sclafani, kind of a similar situation, both incredible talents. Sclafani actually had to come in for a little bit in that semifinal game, but we know without a doubt it's likely going to be Turpin. Turpin and Reed, two goalies that just continue to get better as the season goes on.
Yeah, the goaltending matchup, really the goaltenders all around the SHL have just been, I think, the best that they have been ever. And you're getting two of the best right here. You don't have, Trapp, you don't have Marsh, you don't have Preston, but these two goalies, I mean, yeah, maybe they don't shine as well because they're on such good teams, but that's a big part of what makes a good goaltender is the defense in front of them. And I think both these teams really excel in that.
And that will bring us to the one versus two combined matchup that we'll talk about as well before we talk to Adam Cheras. It's another 1-2. It's BGHW and Maine. You've got Maine, who has been a defensive unit. They only allowed two goals. They have two shutouts in three games in the state tournament, only allowing point 0.7 goals a game if you include the overtime periods, it appears. Or no, actually, no, that's two goals allowed in three games. So that's not even including overtime periods and going by the period. Whereas on the BGHW end, they're scoring 5 goals a game. And of course, that is with huge help from Cam Christopher. He's got 7 points in the state tournament, 3 goals, 4 assists. And BGHW really proved that they have an offense with that dominant 5-2 win against arguably the best combined offense in playing field. And that will bring us to a rematch of the semifinal we saw last year. Me and you were both on the call for that. And we remember a lot about how close that game got at the end as we would go to overtime.
Yeah, it was 3-0 BGHW. Maine with a huge comeback to tie the game and send it to OT. But Reed Gergert's got the game winner to send his team to the United Center. These two teams have played twice this season. They're obviously not in the same league, but let's take a look at these results. September 21st, Maine with a 3-2 win in a shootout. And on January 15th, BGHW with a 3-2 win in regulation. So same thing as New Trier versus St. Viator. These two teams play each other close. They're very well and evenly matched. At the end of the day, BGHW is the one seed, but it's again, Luke, one of those where I wouldn't necessarily pick either team as a favorite. I think that this is a coin flip. I think, in my years covering high school hockey, this is probably the most excited I've been for both state championship
Yeah.
games. I think both of them are going to prove to be great games. And Luke, who knows? Maybe both of them will need extra overtime hockey.
Well, I mean, last year is giving me flashbacks in a good way to whereas we saw so much overtime hockey, especially in the combined realm. So we will see once again, one last time. It is St. Viator, New Trier. They play second. We rewinded the clock back. The combined game is at 6 p.m. So it's BGHW Maine, then St. Viator, New Trier. If you go to the Wolves website or on A-High, you can find tickets for the state championship game. 12 bucks, no parking charges. I want All-State Arena to be absolutely packed. I mean, there is no excuse. That lower bowl should absolutely be filled, and I'm sure they're going to have to open the upper seating as well. They're moving the game from the city to the suburbs, and I'm hoping that can bring a lot more accessibility for, of course, these schools that all come from suburban areas, with the exception of Maine, who's got a little bit of Chicago area right next to it. But I think for the most part, it's a versatile area for everybody, and we're expecting you all there, right, Dylan?
Absolutely. We'll be there, so should you.
Yeah, come say
We
hi
we want
as
as
long as you don't sneak up to the press
few
box.
people to watch the broadcast as possible because we want
That's
you to be
true.
in the building. So
Not saying
it's
that our
that.
product is bad, but he makes a very good point. So, Adam Cheras, head coach of New Trier. We talked to Tim Benz last week, and we're going to nearly close out this episode today talking to Cheris, who was in the state championship game for the fourth time in his 4 years of leading New Trier Green, starting now. Well, we talked to Tim Benz, head coach of St. Viator last week, so why wouldn't we bring on the other state championship appearance head coach in Adam Cheris? We bring you on for a consecutive year, and is that twice this season, or am I crazy, Dylan?
Twice this season. I think
Twice this season.
you were our first guest this year and
That's
now our
right.
last, at least in the before we preview nationals. We got a couple more episodes to go after this week, but Adam, welcome.
Good to be here, guys. Good to talk to you.
Thank you for your time. And obviously, we'll be talking a lot over the next couple of days, prepping up for the state championship game. And I want to ask you some of those questions right now, but I don't want to ask too many, deep and personal things because obviously coaches are coaches. You don't want too much being out there. But I will say, I want to talk about before anything, and I think Dylan will talk about the state semifinal game, but I want to look back at that SHL final because I really haven't gotten to talk to you about that since then. What were your overall takeaways from that game, and how are you going to utilize this going into playing St. Viator for yet another time?
Well, kind of like you said, Luke, there's things that we learn from games that we, certainly take away. That was a great game for us to take things away from. Things that we don't really want to talk about here because it's stuff that we've seen that we think can, certainly give us a better chance in the upcoming game. What few standouts from that game, certainly Viator speed is insane. They really have it's got to be one of the fastest teams I've ever played against. And I think that's what really kind of sunk in. So it's how do we match up the right way and position ourselves the right way to counter that. But you got to be able to score goals as well. And we can play the best game ever, but if we don't put one in, we're not winning the game. So those were a few of the things that we're kind of focusing on without going too in depth on it. But they're a great team. They finished number one for a reason. Like I've said all along, really respect their staff, their players, their community. They really came together for that game. It's great to see. You want to see that in the SHL. You want to see each program rise up to the top. And, we knew last year when we beat them in the semis, that was a heck of a game. I was watching some tape on that recently, just reminding myself, oh my God, what a game that was.
That was insane.
And you knew that they'd be there this year. You knew they'd be one of the top. They were bringing back almost everyone, and it's was something that we knew going into the season that they'd be there and that they were kind of the top this year. So we're excited for the game. Excited to see what we can do.
Well, you talk about St. Viator getting that number one overall seed. Not to necessarily say that you are the underdog coming into this game, but according to the seeds, you are. As your first time kind of in that role as the lower seed, you're not going to have the last change in that state championship game. Are you embracing kind of an underdog mindset, or are you going into this game like you would, any of the last three state championships?
I think it's a really good point, Dylan. We have gone in as the one seed for the last 3 years. So this is a different path for sure. It's a different journey, and each year is a different journey. We have 17 new faces on our team this year. 17 spots. That's got to be a first for New Trier. I mean, we're a very deep program. We normally have, some bigger numbers for underclassmen that we didn't have this year. So yeah, it's a different way to look at it. Last change is something that we like to use. If you look at the SHL game, I don't think Vider played, their fourth line. Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe you guys know differently. I don't recall seeing some of their guys out there. So,
Yeah.
when you get into a match situation, we feel that, we know who to play against our three lines. I'm sure Tim will throw some wrinkles in there to throw us off, but we're going to counter that with some of our own. It is certainly a different scenario. Like I pointed out before the SHL game, it was interesting in the regular season that the away team won every game in the series. Of
Yeah.
course, take out the SHL final, but maybe the matchups mean something more at times. Maybe they don't. We're prepared for it either way, though.
Yeah, really well said. And you talk about the path getting to the state championship game. It was not easy having to play Loyola in that semifinal. I would imagine you guys really handled them well at the start of the season. Then they started to chip away at you. They got the last regular season game. They took game two of the SHL semifinals. You guys were able to bounce back. And it's always hard to beat a team twice in a row, but you guys really showcased it well in that state semifinal game. How was it like controlling the emotions of your guys? Of course you played this Loyola team countlessly, but state semifinal game for some of these players, you mentioned such a new team. It's the biggest game of their life up to that point, and you
Yeah.
clearly controlled them well.
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple things to that. We struggled down the stretch. I think a lot of teams faced the same issue we did with injuries and sickness. We had guys with mono. Some of our top guys were out.
Hmm.
Losing Marino for games, losing Jenner Layden for a long time. It changes things. It really does. And when you're playing those big games and you're tired and you're without guys, it's tough. So we certainly stumbled down the stretch. There's no question in my mind about that. And it's not an excuse. It's a reality that, Vider, we needed to win one game basically in four, and we couldn't do that. So I think that was a wake up call, though. I think there's a silver lining. We always look for the silver lining. When you kind of go through that, you take a deep check in the mirror, really say to yourself, well, what are we here? Who are we? What's our identity? Um, so as we healed, as we got better, we started to gain confidence. And just getting Jenner back in the lineup was a shot in the arm. It's like, free agent joining your team at the trade deadline, you're getting the top guy back, the top guy from that's available. So it really worked like that for us. And it gave us that confidence back to start playing the way we know we can play. Um, you know, it's again, one of those things like I always look at it and say, how do you get to your best version of yourself at the right time? And I think we're finding that best version of ourselves right now. So, the Loyola game is always going to be an emotional game. We played them 8 times this year. Cramming that much emotion into one season is probably too much. Between them and Ignatius, that was 15 games versus two really talented teams where, there is that rivalry. Sometimes friendly and sometimes not so friendly. It's the way those games ended was not very friendly. So I think, the team went into that game and it was really keeping in mind that, hey, we are the best version of ourselves right now. We feel very confident right now. We feel we can play with anyone. We feel we can beat anyone. And if we go do the things that we are capable of doing, we're going to win the game. And what I tell my team, and it's, come up, they always ask me, hey, coach, are you nervous? And it's the same response every time. It's my nervousness is a zero, assuming, of course, we play our game. If we bring the version of ourselves that I know exists, we're winning the game. Now, you look at some of the way those games started, where we're getting outshot badly, that zero creeps up to, a 90 plus real quick. But I think in this particular case, in both, the Iggy and the Loyola game, our team did a really good job of, withstanding an immediate surge and then kind of asserting ourselves and taking over. But yeah, that rivalry with Loyola is, a forever rivalry. And it's, that's a tough game to be up for every time. And like you said, they found a way to chip away at us during the season. That 2-0 game they played against us, I thought was the best game I saw them play all year. Really impressive. And they have that kind of talent there. So you can't look past that. So we were really ready for, game three of that series and then certainly, the semifinal game.
And on top of that, I mean, I don't know if I'm just stretching this out because they wore the same number. Jenner Layden, when he got back in that lineup, that's when you guys really started to win. You talk about getting him back. He kind of reminds me of Hans Huber in a way. They both wore 91, right? And they're always in the right place at the right time, as well as just great overall players. Do you feel a little bit of relation between those two, or am I just driving myself crazy?
It's a little stretch. They're both super important to a team, and but their roles were very different. Hans
Yes.
was a guy who would run a guy, their top guy on any team into the stands 50 times a game and not think twice about doing it the 51st time. He just was an in your face, I am going to beat you no matter what. Jenner's a very high skill level player that is going to say, hey, I want to take over this game and put a puck in the net. Not that Hans didn't do that. Hans scored that game winner against Bider last
Vider,
year.
yeah.
Yeah. So, he had plenty of big goals for us, but just, Hans is a guy who's going to run you over. Jenner's a guy who's going to run right by you.
Well said.
Well, you look at the semifinals on both sides of the bracket. We just discussed the 5-0 over Loyola and St. Viator with an emotional 3-2 overtime win against a GBS team. And no disrespect to GBS, but Viator probably thought that they would have a little bit of an easier time with that. With such different semifinals for both teams in the state championship, is there any message you have to give to your guys of like, hey, listen, we had an easy time with Loyola, but St. Viator, they got a scare last game, and they're probably going to be fired up to make sure that that doesn't happen again. You know, Obviously, I know when you guys and your players go into that game, you're not going to be thinking it will be easy. But is there anything to that? Just two completely different games coming in?
It's a message for us that's a repeated broken record message that if you don't bring your A-plus game, you're very likely going to come out with a loss that night. The games we lost this year were games where we did not play well. You're going to have those types of games. You're going to have some that you squeak by. I think if you looked at those scores and said which game was which, blindly, you would say, oh, yeah, Biter won 5-0 and New Trier won 3-2 in overtime. Um, it's just the way it works sometimes. You can't count anybody out in our league. I mean, Jimmy Philbin is one of the best coaches around. He runs a very tight bonded program where the players buy in and they care and they love the game. And you saw that on display. They did not quit. They kept battling. Preston was outstanding. We stayed and watched the game and it was like, oh my, this is amazing that they just keep fighting. And, Preston keeps making big saves and they're finding their opportunities. Um, I don't think for us it was a shot in the arm of confidence, like, hey, these guys are more beatable. We feel like we're, right there with Vider that, hey, we're 2-2 this year. And if we play our A game, then we're going to win the game. And if we don't, then they're going to win the game. So it's going to come down to that in our minds.
Yeah, well said. Last question on my behalf is just you're so used to playing inside the United Center, and this is probably totally overthought, but I'm curious if you guys have looked into Allstate Arena because you guys have not played there. A it had not played their offense. It's going to be a different type of atmosphere, different type of locker room, different type of tunnel. I'm assuming you guys don't overcomplicate that, but is there a little bit of a tracing motion in the back of your head saying this is going to be a little bit different even for the returners, but of course still a hockey game?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think, the United Center was an amazing experience for the last 3 years. Um, you deal with the hand you're dealt, right? When they changed it this year to Allstate and the Wolves supported, the league as well as they have, we got excited about Allstate. It's going to be a different experience. We kind of got used to the UC. We knew our way around there. You know your way through the tunnels, where to go get a snack, where you can stretch. Some of our guys have played in the SHL All-Star game, at All-State. Green hasn't had any games there. So it'll be a different experience. I'm curious to see how it goes. But I think what you're going to get a sense of with the crowd, that's going to be the difference. At the United Center, when you have 10 to 12,000 people there and the lower bowl's filled, it feels like it's a lot. When you're at Allstate, and if you get that same number, that whole place is going to be packed. You're not going to have a seat left. So that's what we're hoping for is that you have that kind of electric energy in the building, which I think both teams are going to really enjoy and what an experience that makes.
Well, last one from me, Adam, is I'm looking at your state playoff game so far. You're obviously 4-0. You've outscored your opponents 25-1. You've scored at least a goal in every single period. I mean, you talk about consistency. What makes this team, and not just the players on your roster this year, but over the years, even predating your time as a head coach, what is it about this new Trier program that always seems to find a way to get these games done? And, even the earlier rounds, Mount Carmel, Fenwick, not necessarily gimmies, but you still go out there and play and you get it done 10-0, 6-0. I mean, at the start of the season, is it kind of well known that it's, our goal is we're going to at least the state championship this year or bust?
It really is, Dylan. It's a good point. We take a lot of pride in our program. It's historically very rich in terms of getting to the finals, winning state championships, always being a contender. And we have a incredible talent pool community with Winnetka and Wilmette that really, support hockey. So we get huge numbers. Our spring numbers this year again are, in that 140 to 150 range, where it's just, we keep getting more and more players. And I think part of it is also, there is that tradition of winning that guys want to continue it. For us, failure is, not winning state. I know for other teams it's very different, but we feel that pressure all year long of, hey, we want to keep this going. We want to, get our fourth in a row. How are we going to do that? What do we have to do to get there? And what, that kind of predates my time that we've always had that mentality of winning. What we've done since I've been there is really instill that culture of like, hey, we're a band of brothers here, and we fight together. We put that jersey on. It doesn't matter what team you're on. You're part of something, and it sinks in with these guys. And I think our best teams are our most bonded teams, and this team is incredibly bonded. They are one of the tightest, you know, call, pack of thieves if you want. They're just together on everything. They truly believe in each other. They're willing to sacrifice for each other. And I think at the end of the day, that's what gets you to the top is being bought in that way.
Well said, Coach Cheris. And you talking about 140, 150 players has me thinking like almost what the next name of the Nutrier baby will be, whether it's Nutrier Black or I can't even think. But
Yeah.
anyways, thank you so much for your time today, Coach, and good luck in the state championship on Friday.
You guys, thanks so much. I appreciate it. It's always good to see you guys do these kinds. Your casts are awesome. I love them. Fun that you do it. So looking forward to seeing you guys on Friday and seeing how it goes.
Yep, we'll be there. Good
Yeah,
luck.
for sure. All right, guys. Have a great day.
Thank you.
You
All
too.
right. Bye bye.
Adam Cheras headed back to the state championship game. It is him against SHL Coach of the Year, Tim Benz. We talk about the players and how good of a matchup that is, as Cheras mentioned, with the lines and how those are going to match up. And I don't think we throw enough flowers to the coaching matchup in this one. It's great on great, Dylan. I can't wait.
Yeah, it's going to be one heck of a game, one heck of a coaching matchup as well. Coming off that SHL final win, obviously state's the more important one, but SHL is important too. And for St. Viator, they got to prove it, and for New Trier, they got to show them what they're really focused on, which is state.
Since we are on the topic of it, I think we're just going to do our highest scoring game right now. I feel that's more fitting. And let's do it because I picked correctly last week. It was 2 points. It was a quarterfinal. I got the first selection. Couldn't miss, right? 6 goals was enough. As St. Viator beat GBN 5-1. So I now lead 4.5 to 4. So we're just saying this is it. Winner take all. I'm going to create a line for the state championship game. Dylan's going to pick higher or lower because I'm sorry. I cannot pick a team for the state championship game because I will second guess myself like crazy. I don't want to knock on one team and compliment the other because that's just how good the matchup is, and I'll probably end up on some bar stool after the state championship one way or another anyway. So we're gonna avoid that at all costs, and we're just gonna go higher or lower. We know the defenses are insane. The goaltending is incredible. So I'm setting this line pretty low because of course, we had fairly lower scoring semifinals and quarterfinals. I'm going to go, you might call me crazy. I'm going to go with 4.5, Dylan.
Man,
Remember,
that is a tough line. I
it
uh
because
I
remember, it was a
really
1-0 game last time between these two. So I don't know if they're going to have that
right.
usual 3-2 or if it's going to be less.
Even
So
a 2-1, a 3-1, that still goes under. So, man, that is a really tough call. And Luke, you said it 4.5 to 4. This is for all the marbles. As since you had the edge coming into this one, I gave you the choice. You want to pick the line or do you want to pick over under? You wanted to make the line, and I think that is a really good one. I have to go under. I
Yeah,
think,
I was worried about that.
it's like you said, 1-0, 3-1. I'm thinking of the possible scores. I don't really, I could see this being a 3-2, not much higher than that. I can see
Yeah.
it. I don't think I can see it being a 4-3. I don't think I could see it even really being a 4-2. I mean, these two teams have great goaltending, great defense, and I think it's every goal is going to count in that one. So, Luke, give me under 4.5 for it all for the dinner paid for by Max Anderson. It is all built up to this one game, and I want that steak dinner. So, give me under 4.5. That means you have got over 4.5. Best of luck, sir.
All right, fair enough. So that will defy the winner, and let's talk about who's winning these semifinal games in the girls' division. Let's look at the quarterfinals real quick. They had to have been played by March 1st, so they're all finished now. We've got the semifinal set. They'll be on Monday, back to back at Rosemont Ice Arena on the West Rink. So York beat number 9 Loyola. They have a semifinal spot. Fenwick beat that's Burlington Central or West, or is just Burlington Grizzlies, right? Is that
Burlington Grizzlies, yeah.
okay? Yes, because
They
it's
rebranded.
in state bracket. It says D86, 88, 89, 204,
Sure.
and like me, I was not sure who that was, so I wanted to reference the true name of the team. Glenbrook wins 4-1 over the Lake Forest. That's a 2-7 matchup. And New Trier smokes Barrington as Barrington's out of the picture. New Trier wins that one 9-2. So we've got two really good matchups that'll be on Monday. York and Fenwick is the first one on the top half. Once again, we'll have that game on SHL Network. In Dillon, there's a bit of a personal personal battle with this one because you look at the York
No doubt.
roster, a lot of names that played for Fenwick and now they're playing against their former teams. So this is going to be storyline after storyline in the first of two semis.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, York did not have a team until this year. So all the girls high school hockey players from York would play for Fenwick. So this is going to be really, really interesting. That's a great point, Luke.
And on the next one, it was Glenbrook and New Trier. That is 2 versus 3. So we've got all chalk here in the semifinals. We'll see if we get another chalk state championship game. New Trier Fenwick might have something to say about that. But it is Glenbrook that earned that number 2 spot. They also impressed with that win against Lake Forest. But New Trier, their offense looking real good as well. This is going to be one toss above a game. And with the girls' division, it's always kind of nice to look back having seen the girls' tournament last year and look down the line, there are some very familiar names on both these teams, especially New Trier. I know Addie Stewart moved on, but you've still got Alexis Bornhoff on New Trier, alongside plenty of other names that I recognize. Elise Fontana, I mean, the list goes on. So, oh boy. As well as the same goalie room as last year is what I can see for New Trier. So they're returning a lot of numbers, but so is Glenbrook. They also have Casey Stockbridge, who will likely be tending the goal.
Yeah, and one thing that stands out to me here, Luke, is obviously no Phillies, no Barrington,
Shocker.
team that won the state championship 2 years in a row before losing in the final last year. And this year, not only do they miss out on the state championship game, Luke, they miss out on the semifinals. We're not going to be broadcasting them. I don't remember the last time we did not broadcast a Barrington girls game during the season for these state playoffs, let alone two with the semis and the final. So the girls' game seems to be opening up a little bit, and we are not going to have a new champion. That's not guaranteed because New Trier is still in the mix, but we're going to see a team make the state championship for sure that hasn't been there in at least a couple of years.
Absolutely, Dylan. So that is the girls' state tournament, both semifinals, Monday, March 9th, 6:30 p.m. and 8:25 p.m. back to back on SHL Network. The state championship we will have for you as well, noon next Sunday. So the 15th, it is 11 days out as we are recording. We're going to close out here with questions and answers on a lengthy episode here, but hey, it's state week. We knew it was going to be long, and let's close out with some of your thoughts. If you're still here, we have a lot of credit for you because it has been a long episode, but of course, an important one. And sure you're listening to this before the state championship that will be on Friday night for the boys divisions. Let's talk about SHL because we're not exactly done with all the SHL divisions. We've still got a JV division and AHL division to talk about. So let's do that right now because Hunter underscore K41 said, thoughts on the JV matchup tonight? It is New Trier and Lake Forest, a winner take all game for the SHL. And of course, Lake Forest has been so good, but New Trier's JV1 could give them quite a fight here, Dylan. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Luke, no doubt about that. I'm actually on the call for this game tonight. I'm really looking forward to it. And for Lake Forest, this is a team that finished the overall season 39 and 5. They lost
Wow.
5 games all year. They lost twice in SHL play all year. But Luke, one of those was in late January, a 3-2 loss to New Trier, the team that they'll be
Wow.
facing off against tonight. So for New Trier, I think this is a very winnable game. You're obviously going up against a giant. Thoughts on the JV matchup tonight? I don't see Hunter asking us to pick a winner, so I'm just going to say it's going to be a great game, and we could very well see a rematch in state as both these teams are on opposite
Hmm.
semifinals in the JV state bracket as well.
That's really well said, and that's what I'll add on here because it seems you've covered just about everything. As I would say, yes, Lake Forest is on the top half, and New Trier is the underdog to Providence Catholic, who of course always has a great JV team, and that's the 2-3. So if New Trier can sneak by Provi, we could get these two yet again. So a great point you make there. And let's talk about the Academic Hockey League now. Who is winning the A? Says Daryl Johnson, 1987.
Okay.
And it is York and Glenbrook North in that AHL final. We'll also have that broadcast for you on Monday. So we'll carry the girls semifinals and the AHL final. And let's see who's going to come out of this one. York has been so good for a majority of the season, but GBN, I think they made a statement by that state win against Brother Rice, as they are very much an option for this championship as well.
Yeah, Luke, well, teams play each other 3 times in the season in the Academic Hockey League. But if you look at the season series between York and GBN, their first game wasn't until December 13th. Then they played January 11th. Then they played January 29th. Those were their 3 games. York with two nothing wins, and GBN with a 5-3 win. So far, the home team has won every game of this series as well. So that's something to look out for as that game, as the AHL final will be a single game at Addison Ice Arena. But the question is, who's winning the A? I mean, Luke, this might just be because I don't know nearly as much about the A, but I got to give it to York. I mean, they're the number one seed for a reason. You look at the standings in AHL played so far this season, regular season and playoffs, they have got a record of 24 5 and 1. That's going to be pretty hard to beat. So give me York to take the AHL.
Oh boy, yeah, I don't know who to pick here. I think since you took York, I'll take GBN. They proved me wrong once, and I heard wrong for it when I said that Brother Rice was going to be such a great team down the stretch. And don't get me wrong, they still are, and I think that just goes to prove how good GBN can play. So I'll take the Spartans here since you took the Dukes, but deep down in my heart, I really do know that it is a toss-up, and that's why I'm excited to see that game firsthand on Monday. We will not talk to you until we know that there is a state champion. We know that there will be a JV champion. That will actually be, you're probably seeing this after the JV championship, so I'm curious how that went. And the AHL on Monday. We've got a lot to recap when we come back. But man, what an episode here, Dylan. Pleasure to have Adam Cheras on. Any final words before we sign off into next week where we'll know the winners this year in 2026?
No, Luke, but I can say it's been an absolute joy covering Illinois high school hockey with you this season on the podcast, second year of the podcast. And by my calculations, if I look at the schedule, I think we do have a couple more episodes in us because
Absolutely.
we've got next week, we'll recap the state championship, probably talk to a couple people. We'll have the girls' state championship to preview. The week after that, review the girls' state championship, talk about nationals. And then I think we end with one more recapping the Illinois teams at nationals. So that's 3 more episodes after this one, even though the Illinois boys and SHL team season will be over here, at least in the state. But don't worry, we've got 3 more episodes coming your way before the end of the season and we officially sign off on 2026. But Luke, it's always so fun covering the SHL and the high school hockey season, and this game coming up in 2 days from now at the time of recording this is what you think about all the way back in August and September when you're first starting out. So just pumped and fired up to see who wins. And for our game, I'm hoping it goes under 4.5, whichever team wins.
Yeah, right. All right, Dylan Ward, Luke Jordan, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the flip side of the state championships at the Red and Combined division. Once again, Friday night, 6 and 8:30. We'll see you in person there.